played 77 games for the footy club through the 70s and the early 80s, but he's probably better known for his exploits in the world game, the global international game of basketball. We talk of Bill Mildenhall. Bill, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm not sure why, but anyway, we'll go along with it.
I'm sure I've been told you've got a couple of good stories, so I'm keen to get stuck into it. But I did want to, I guess, jump off. Before we talk about your football career, I want to ask you, how does one make the move from playing professional football to being a professional basketball referee who then goes on to referee the biggest events in the world? How does that change take place?
Well, it all, so in my circumstances, came about. I mean, I was playing footy and I'd also played basketball as a junior, and up to under 18s, I'd played basketball. And then I realized I wasn't going to be good enough to continue to play at any, a great level. So I decided to take up officiating, and it was also a means of earning a little bit of pocket money. So I was just, I started when I was 17 or 18 at officiating. And at that stage, had just been sort of invited down to St Kilda for the under 19s or whatever. And so I continued to officiate as well as trying to play footy as well.
So grew up a St Kilda fan, I assume played junior football as well. How did the junior days go, and how did it come about you getting, I guess, connected to St Kilda in the first place to play for us?
I'm a sort of a tragic story in terms of I was born and bred in St Kilda. I went to St Kilda Park Primary School, which is across the road from the Junction Oval, just across the park, in fact. And so every Tuesday and Thursday night, I used to go from after school, I'd walk across the road and watch St Kilda train and kick the ball back if the ball got kicked over the fence or whatever. And so I was just a mad keen St Kilda supporter. And my mum used to take me to every single game ever since I was a little tacker. So for me then to get invited and to come down to St Kilda was like a dream come true. So I played locally with St Kilda City, and in those days, it's not quite the same system that currently is now, but if you were sort of, I guess, stood out a little bit in those sort of competitions, in the under-17 competition, the South East Suburban League, you'd get an invitation to go down to St Kilda to train with the under-19s. So I went the first year when I was 17, I think, and didn't like it that much because I had to catch 2 trains, and it was a pain in the bum. And so I didn't continue, and so I went back and played with St Kilda City seniors that year, the next year, which I think, looking back on it, probably really helped my preparation to play in the future. So then the next year I got an invitation down again to St Kilda, and so I decided I'd stick at it this time around. So I did, and played in the Resis, and got a few games in the. I played a whole season I was still under 19, but I played most of my games in the reserves. And then the next year I got some senior games.
Yeah, so I just wanted to find out, so you played in the back pocket, but tell me, if you could have your pick of anywhere on the ground, where would you like to have been playing?
Well, the back pocket was my probably only opportunity ever getting a game. But playing in the reserves, I was sort of usually either in the centre or on the ball. But there was a bit of an opportunity or a niche there. I mean, I ended up taking over in the back pocket from Wayne Judson, who'd sort of played for Victoria as a back pocket player. So I wasn't aiming to try and get into a position that, in that position initially. But it just so happened that I got a couple of games there, and I think I obviously did okay and stuck around.
Now, there was, you do sound very modest when you talk about that, but speaking of that back pocket position, it does sound like you might have won that role over someone who's become somewhat of a legend of the game, a Hall of Famer, premiership coach. You were competing with that role at the footy club with Mick Malthouse, is that right?
Oh, yeah, Mick and I sort of came together pretty much at the same time at St Kilda. And we're very similar in terms of when we did get games, we'd sort of play, I think the terminology they call it is a utility. So we would fill in any hole that was prevalent. And you're right, yeah, Mick and I sort of both got selected at different times in the back pocket. We played a number of games together where I was in the back pocket and he may have been on the half-back flank and vice versa. And then I played some games on the wing as well. So Mick and I were ended up being competitors, and the irony of all of that was we were really good mates because I used to take him to training every night. I'd pick him up from work and on my way from my work, and pick him up and take him to training and then take him home. So we had a fairly close relationship, but over that time, even though we were virtually vying for the same position. Mind you, history now shows that he certainly went on a lot further than I do. That's for sure.
In Australia, he did, but you managed to go international. So first game, senior for St Kilda, come up against Hawthorn, who at that point of their, I guess, they were in a bit of a period of time where they had a very good side. They were a very strong side, but you've come into the team, obviously got up forward at some point and kicked the goal. And what are the memories of the first game playing senior football?
I think the irony of all of that is I think it was my first kick. So I actually kicked a goal with my first kick. I mean, that now that's a massive sort of achievement. But at the time, I don't think we made such a big deal about it. But in fact, I probably was on for a long time prior to that, but didn't get a kick and eventually got a mark or something and was able to kick a goal. So, but it was, for me, it was just a dream come true because, as I said, I was a mascot. I started as a mascot at St Kilda. I used to run out when we'd run out onto the ground. And I remember a story my mum told us that at one stage I turned to her and said, why did you call me Billy Mildenhall? Why didn't you call me Billy Young? Because Billy Young was a full forward at St Kilda, and I liked him, so I couldn't understand why I should have been called the same name.
Now, tell me, Bill, you transitioned into basketball reffing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basketball reffing then and now is not a professional full-time, so professional but not full-time.
Yep.
So there are some similarities with AFL umpires. Do you think that referees and officiating men and women should be full-time?
Well, it's really hard to compare. I mean, it's all based on finances, I guess, as well. But at some stage, I mean, we always thought in the basketball fraternity there was a chance that you could become a full-time referee. But the competition doesn't quite go long enough to sort of justify, a full-time payment. I mean, as it turned out, I was a teacher for 20 years, and then Basketball Australia approached me and asked me if I would move across to Basketball Australia as an administrator, as the referees director. So I sort of became a full-time person in that field, as well as still officiating at that stage. So I sort of was a little bit different. Currently, it surprises me in the AFL financially. I mean, surely to goodness they can afford to pay the umpires a reasonable salary to, compensate for them not having to work as well. But as I guess one of the things that, the question would always be is, what do you do with your time? What happens? Where do you go? Like you can only umpire one, say at footy, you can only umpire one game a week. So, or generally you could maybe do, if it was something midweek. But, so it's a lot of downtime in between just the officiating side of things. Basketball, a little bit different. If you look at the NBA, all the NBA referees are all full-time. They're full professional. And they get into that profession and stay, for 25, 35 years as an official. But I mean, often they'd be working 2 and 3 games a week. So it's not quite the same as what we were doing.
Now, in the last couple of years, we've had the AFL start to crack down on umpire abuse, and in the NBA, which you talk about, some of the players get pretty sensitive over the calls that the refs make. What's your view about players remonstrating with officials and the view? I'm not sure that you took kindly to it when you were a ref here in Australia, but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, like the rules are set out with basketball that, looking back, I sort of got myself into a bit of trouble because I was probably regarded as being a lot softer than some of the other referees. And partly because, I probably had a little bit more empathy and understanding of what the players were going through. So I'd sort of be a little more sympathetic, if you like, and sort of more understanding. I used to get told off a bit, in terms of, you should have been issuing technical fouls and so on. But in my own personal career, I think it helped me enormously because of having not been such a dictator in terms of, imposing the rules to the letter of the law. And so I think also a lot of in my time, we were encouraged probably more so than they are now, was to communicate with the players as best you could. And I because I think I'd played a bit of sport as well, I think I had a little bit of an opportunity to players would sort of accept me a little more because of the fact that I had played footy and they understood the frustrations that you go through. The current situation now is that it's a really difficult, because I've sort of been an administrator as well in basketball. And so you often have to enforce what the rules say. And you can't sort of, the rules are there and there's a fair amount of pressure from above to actually apply the rules as they are written or dictated. And so, the referees are in a bit of a hiding to nothing really because they get into a bit of trouble if they don't police the behaviour of players. And I don't know the answer to that question. It's a really good question because it's a balance between, what's acceptable. And one of the other problems also is what might be acceptable to me may not be acceptable to another official. And then you get massive inconsistencies, which is then, brings the whole thing undone as well. So you sort of sometimes have to, I think the times that I sort of gave technical fouls, I generally say to the player, listen, you've given me no option, but I've got a technical foul here, and then they sort of they'd be a little bit more sympathetic and understanding.
Now, before we go full time into your basketball career, which is there is a long list of achievements in that part of your life, but I guess just to get back to St Kilda, you got to the club and played at the club in, I guess, what would be called a period of transition, right? I mean, there was a really solid period of relative success through the mid to late 60s and then the early 70s until you arrived in 74. And then from that period on, it became really dark times for the footy club. I think your winning percentage playing for the club was around 27%, 28%. There weren't a lot of wins in that period. But what was that like? I mean, I've seen you talk about it before as it being a dream come true to play for your boyhood club and all those sorts of things. But what was that like as a St Kilda supporter playing for the club in a period of regular losing?
Well, to begin with, it probably helped me to get a game because we weren't doing very well. So we didn't have the talent around us. But it was massively frustrating, obviously, because it sort of, at the time, I don't think it bothered me because we always thought that we could still win a game. And then when we did win games, occasionally that, that was a massive achievement. But it sort of didn't, I can't ever remember being down in the dumps or sort of terribly concerned about the fact that we weren't winning and that, I don't want to play with this team because we're not doing so well. It was always, first off, it was just a competition to actually get a game. To be selected in the team in the first place, it was always my ultimate worry because I wasn't, regarded as a number one pick in the team each week. So I'd be concerned about playing from one game to the next. And what it probably created is a little bit of individuality in terms of you were looking after your own butt to begin with. So I was more concerned about getting enough possessions to justify getting a game the next week. So the actual aspect of winning wasn't quite as significant. However, having said that, it was much, much easier to get a game the next week if you won. For you, it's much easier to play in a winning team than it is to play in a losing team, I'll tell you. Everything, you do is you're rewarded. And in our circumstance, when we were losing, it was hard yakka and it was really tough that, so I always felt that it was much easier to play in a team that was successful rather than a team that weren't quite as successful as you'd like.
So first two seasons, you get 11 games between the two of them, 74, 75, but 76 come in and 21 out of the 22 games for the season. So basically cemented a spot in the team, it would seem. You pick up the most improved player for that season. You're able to then back it up again with another 19 games in 77. Were you at a point there thinking, I'm going to make a real crack at this, a real career? I've got a spot here and I'm set into the team now. Did it feel like that this is where your path was going to go?
Not really. As I said, I was more concerned, and because we weren't winning, the first thing you'd ever worry about doing. And I can give you a good example of this is, I won't say who the player was, but a player who was an established player. I ran past him at one stage to get a handball, and because that was part of my style of play, off the back pocket of running by. And this particular player said, "No, Billy, I can't give you a handball because I haven't had a stat so far in this quarter." And so in the old days, it used to be in the stats the next day on the Sunday Observer or something. It'd have quarter by quarter of your handballs and kicks, but the kicks would be marked down by each quarter. Handballs were just a total. So if you've given 3 handballs in the second quarter, but you didn't have a kick, it would look 0. And so that didn't look very good for your stats. So that was a true story that this player just said, "Look, I'm sorry, mate, I can't give it to you because I haven't had a stat so far this quarter." And unfortunately, that was the attitude that we tended to have, because it was all, just looking after yourself and trying to do enough to make sure that you got a game the next week. And so it's sort of, it becomes a very self-perpetuating, like it keeps on sort of growing because you're worrying about those sort of things that, if you're on a winning streak, it's much easier. You don't have to worry about so much your stats, because chances are if we've won, the team won't be changed terribly much. If you lose, the chances are they have to be seen to be making changes. And we would probably, I don't know what the stats would be, but I reckon we'd average, 3 or 4 players in and out every week because of, the fact that we weren't winning.
I'd love to take you back to basketball as long as I've got the permission from Mr. Splitter.
Go for it, mate. Go for it.
So Nick quite rightly says that your CV when it comes to basketball and your career as a ref is really something that I think will be unsurpassed in Australian basketball history, at least in my lifetime. And I'm still, I know I look old, Bill, but I'm actually relatively young, so that's a long time away. But I want to take you to 1992. You were selected for your first Olympic Games. And at the Olympics, from my recollection, it was the first time that they'd allowed professional ballers from the NBA to compete. And I just want to take you through the USA, the Dream Team, the first one. This is their roster.
You've stolen my question here, Phil. Thanks for that.
Robinson, Ewing, Latner, Karl Malone, Barkley, Stockton, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Scottie Pippen, Chris Mullin, Michael Jordan, and Drexler. Now, I know that you didn't get the opportunity to ref them in a game, but if you had it, you did?
I am refereeing them against Germany. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Were you there actually mind on the job refereeing, or were you pinching yourself going, this is unbelievably ridiculous?
Well, you can imagine what you feel like. Like, it's funny you mentioned, whether I got an appointment. When they make the announcement, they make the appointments the night before. And I always thought it was a chance because they divide into pools and you don't officiate your country in what pool your country's in, and US were in the other pool to Australia. So I was a chance to get a look in with the US, and then I think it was the second game of the round that I got the appointment. And I mean, it's just you're gobsmacked. I mean, you're dumbfounded, but you sort of walk out there, mind you. Irrespective of how good they were and how much better they were, and they still complain, they still bitch, and they still challenge every call you make. So it wasn't as easy as what you would like to have thought. The fact I was thinking, oh shit, these guys are going to be, they won't be worried about too much of anything at all. But I mean, they've got massive egos and huge pride in what they do, and so everything was serious, just the same as any other time. The irony of it all was I refereed with a guy by the name of Zhu, and Zhu was a Chinese referee whom I'd met and refereed with previously at a World Championships. And he was a super nice guy. He was a tall Chinese guy, which is unusual, but and so we go out. This is true. I said to him, just before we went out onto the court, the guy in charge of the referees came into the change room, and he said, "Oh, did you see the Dream Team's first game?" Oh, I mean, everybody did. Millions of people watched the game. Of course, we watched the thing. And he said, Charles Barkley misbehaves. He needs to be technical foul. And I look across to Zhu, who's sitting there. Zhu's got a big smile on his face. He can't understand English, so he's got no idea what he's saying. So it's up to me to sort of go out. So this is so true. So we walk out on the floor, and so I Chuck Daly, the coach, and I said, "Look, we've been instructed because of the behaviour of Barkley before the last game. We've been instructed to tech foul Barkley if he misbehaves." And I promise you, I swear to God, this is what he said. He turned to me and he said, "Throw the mother out of here. We don't want him anyway." And I went, "Are you serious? Are you for real?" Because he was a real individual, and he was just so difficult to handle. And even the coach couldn't handle him. And I'm going, "Are you for real?" I look across the Zoo. Zoo's got a big smile. He doesn't even know what he said. So,
well,
I'm just running up and down and hoping that nothing had ever happened.
So I've got two quick questions for you, but just for those basketball fans out there, the interesting thing about the American team was the controversy was about Christian Laettner being selected. He got the last spot on the team, and he got the last spot on the team over the number one draft pick out of college, Shaquille O'Neal. So he was picked. He was picked over Shaquille O'Neal, which was the controversy leading into the Olympics. Anyway, what I wanted to ask you, Bill, best Australian player that you've seen or refereed, and that it could be two different players because, of course, there are a lot of Australian great basketballers that have played the game since you retired, and then the best basketballer you've seen of all time.
I'll just correct you with that Dream Team. Laettner was selected because they had to choose a non-professional
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's why that's why he got selected over Shaquille O'Neal, because Shaquille had just been selected to go pro, but had just come from college. Yep.
I didn't know that. No, wow. So Shaq missed out.
Yeah.
Goodness. Yeah. So what we were saying, the best Australian player that I've ever really, it's impossible to go past Andrew Gase. Andrew was just not only domestically, in our own competitions here, but he also was able to stand out and dominate internationally as well. At World Championships and Olympics. Not so much, he went to the NBA, but he didn't really, probably set the world alight then, but, his ability to play here was just, and to play for Australia was enormous. And so it's really hard to go past him. What was the other question here?
And the best basketballer of all time that you've watched?
That I've watched?
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to, you can't, how could I sit here and not say Michael Jordan? To be able to referee Michael Jordan was just, amazing. It was just incredible. And he did things that you just don't ever think that was possible. He still bitches. He complains. He still complains just like everybody else. I'm thinking, why in the hell are you worrying about what you do? You can just, but he was, he was just enormous. And he didn't ever look like he was trying. Never ever looked like that he was really putting a massive effort in. So you can't go past him.
I don't want to gloss over your domestic career, because that is worth talking about as well. But I did want to ask you about one other Olympic event, and you talk about Michael Jordan doing things that you can't imagine or have never seen before and whatever. But you refereed another incredible moment in international basketball, and one of the greatest dunks of all time, no matter what competition, international, NBA, NBL, it doesn't matter what competition. But you were the ref on the docket for Vince Carter's incredible dunk in the 2000 Olympics. How do you stand there on court and watch that happen?
You guys have done a lot of research. That's very good.
That is one of the greatest dunks I've ever seen.
It is. Well, it is regarded as the dunk of the dunk of. It's massive to sort of say, yeah, I was actually refereeing that. The lead up to that was just amazing. They stole the ball. I was the trail official. So we're down one end, the ball's turned over and it's about to head back in the opposite direction. So I sort of start to take off. And Vince Carter steals the ball. So when he steals it, he then heads towards the basket. And I'm the trail official, so the one sort of now I have to stop and turn and go back the other way. And then I'm just preparing myself because there was a defender who was 7'2". I don't know his name. I've forgotten his name. He was the defender between Vince Carter and the basket. And so he set himself to actually stand there and defend. And so immediately I'm thinking, Vince Carter, you're going to charge here. You're just going to crash straight into this defender. And so I've got air in my lungs and in my mouth, ready to blow the whistle to call a charging foul. And then he jumps over the top of him. It was just, I was just absolutely dumbfounded. It was gobsmacked. I was so grateful. Honestly, you guys don't understand how close I was to blowing the whistle, because I thought he couldn't. There's no way that he's just going to charge into this guy. And if you see it on slow motion, or actually if you look at it in video, he does actually put his hand on his head. He actually puts his left hand, I think, on his head and dunks it. Well, technically, can you imagine blowing a whistle in the court?
That's right. Yeah.
And cancelling the basket in that situation?
Well,
I
think it was
amazing.
I think it was Frederick Weiss, I think is his name from France. I think if you make an Olympic team, you must be a pretty good basketballer, but that's probably his most famous moment in his career. So, he's probably glad that you didn't blow the whistle either.
And I think it ruined his career too. And actually, he didn't play very much more after that, because I'm not, whether that was the sole reason, but he didn't have a very long career after that.
So you talk about players being able to talk and all that sort of thing. But you probably would have had a few coaches in your ear at points during the games and that sort of thing as well. Who talks more, the players or the coaches? And what's probably maybe a memorable or the best or the cleverest sort of maybe little quirk someone's given you at some stage during a game?
I think the coaches problem in my time, the coaches tended to speak more than the players do. And that was partly because probably we allowed them to make the conversations with you and so on. Now, some of the coaches were really so approachable and they'd make sort of, funny cracks at you at different stages and you'd sort of laugh at them. The one I had the most run-ins with was a guy, Bruce Palmer, and Bruce Palmer was renowned for being a referee hater and one that would always give you a really hard time. When I say a referee hater, he'd push the line and he'd get to as close to the line as he possibly could. And I remember one occasion, and this is true, I'm running up and down and he starts calling out to me. He goes, "Billy, kiss me, Billy, kiss me." And I'm going, "Bruce, what are you talking about? What's the matter?" So eventually it got to me, so I said, "Bruce, what are you saying? Why am I saying?" He said, "Well, Billy, I always want to kiss the person who's screwing me." So, I mean, what was I going to do? I'm not going to tick foul him or whatever. So
Too clever.
It was too good. But he had lots of little quips and stuff. He was really quite clever at what he'd say. Most of the referees didn't like him, having to deal with him, but I sort of had a bit of a soft spot for him because of the way he was able to communicate with him.
Now, I just wanted to jump in. Sorry, Phil, if you've got something to come next, but your NBL resume is quite astonishing when you look at it, I guess, as a list, and it's in front of you. But 16 consecutive NBL Referee of the Year awards, NBL Grand Final referee, I think the same period, 87 to 2011, something like that, 16, 17 years straight. Victorian Basketball Wall of Fame, Confederation of Sport Official of the Year, Victorian Sports Awards Official of the Year. Like you said, officiated in some incredibly big and important international games at the same time. I think for a period, it might have only been a short period, actually, that you held the record for most NBL games refereed. But who were your favourite players, I guess, during that period to referee? Who did you get along with? Who would you or did you spend time outside of games with? Like, were there particular people within the sport that you gravitated towards?
Off the top of my head, I can't really recall anyone in particular. I got on pretty well with players that it's a unique position because when you travel with players that are in the Australian team, so they're playing domestically or in the NBL, and then you get selected into to travel with them as an Australian player. It just breaks down massive barriers. You're now regarded as sort of one of the boys, basically. And so I was really lucky to travel a lot with the Australian team. And not only just to the Olympics and World Championships, but some other tours as well. And so you really got to be quite sort of good mates with a lot of those people. And then when you come back and you referee, then you have a different rapport with them. There's no doubt, that they treat you a little bit differently, and they can also say things to you that you'd laugh at. Whereas if somebody else whom you didn't know as well were to do something like that, you'd technical foul them or whatever. So there was a lot of times, and I had some fantastic experiences overseas. Not just only officiating, but knocking around with the guys all the time. We just had some. I remember we went to a Junior World Championships in Italy, and Mark Bradkey, Warwick Giddy was in the team, and Shane Heel, and there were floods and massive storms, and so the tournament was put off by a week because the courts were all underwater. I mean, the indoor courts, but they were all underwater. So we had to stay in this little town, Belmalenko, I think it was called, this little town. So we're in a little hotel all together for an extra 10 days prior to the tournament starting. And we used to sneak off. It was my job to run ahead and jump this fence and get access into the courts so we could actually train. So I was the gopher, or I was the guinea pig. If I got caught, it didn't really matter. Whereas if one of them did, there was. So, we used to, and look, that was just an amazing, through sort of adversity, that became a fantastic experience for us, and it made me much, much closer to those sort of players, and that to me was sort of some of the best experiences you've ever had. When you get to the Olympics and World Championships, you don't stay in the same venues as they do, and it's a totally different scenario. But when you're touring with teams, then you're just part of the group. You're just another team member, and they treat you that way too.
So we heard from you before saying you grew up a St Kilda fan, that sort of thing. How's supporting St Kilda these days? Do you still get along to a few games? You're still obviously watching every week. You've made your family be St Kilda fans, I'm assuming. You've done that whole thing. You've dragged everyone in with you. And where are you at with that?
Yeah, I try to get to games that it's probably we don't go to as many games as we would like. But I've got I currently got 18 or 17, nearly 18 twins, so a boy and a girl, and they're now playing their own sport. So a lot of times that interferes with. And I had, to my previous marriage, I've got 3 kids that were also sporting people as well, involved in sport too. So that took you away a fair bit to actually go and take them and watch them. But they all barrack for St Kilda, yes, all 5 of them. So they've all been. I mean, my upbringing is just living in St Kilda in the first place and going to school, as I said. So it was inevitable that I'd be sort of brought up as a St Kilda supporter and follow them all the way through.
What's Bill? Just to finish from me, what's the best bit of advice that you've ever been given, either in your footballing career or in your basketball career, or even in life itself, that you'd want to pass on to anybody that's listening?
I can't think of anyone specifically sort of saying something to me, but I think one of my attributes has been that I think I've got on pretty well with people, and irrespective of, whether you've, particularly you're officiating, you can go through circumstances where the players, would dislike you, but it's sort of most of the time after the game, everybody would still want to sort of come up and speak to you and have a drink with you and so on, which I think was always a really pleasant. I appreciated the fact that, one, they accepted me that way. And I think probably, as I mentioned previously, that part of that acceptance is because I think I played a sport as well. And so, like as an official, the guys can look at me like it was bizarre. Even Americans who come out here to play basketball and so on, they turn, hey man, you play that silly game where they don't wear any protection. I go, oh yeah, I try to. So I already had a bit of an in straight away, simply because they sort of knew that I'd played footy and stuff. So, I think that aspect of things and being able to get along with people, and even if you have the authority, like in officiating, a lot of the times I used to, I'd apologize. I'm sorry, look, I've got to give you a technical foul. Sorry, I've got to do this because, I'm going to get into trouble if I don't. So, that was probably one of the things and just being as honest as you possibly can. I mean, and that's in my footy days, I was sort of, I used to look up to so many players and people around me and stuff.
Now, speaking of coaches, just before we finish up, I can't let you get away without doing something that we spoke a little bit about off air. But Phil's asked you about advice that you've given. What's the best piece of advice that you were given, or the best quote or phrase or something that you ever got from Alan Jeans? And if you wouldn't mind, if you could give us your best Jeansy impression while you're at it.
Oh, well, everybody, one of the things that people should understand is that everybody would, when they come down to St Kilda, would, one, he was the most intimidating person you would ever want to meet. You know, like he would scare unless you were an accepted, champion player, or, one of the 4 or 5 that were really, we used to call him his pets. But, but the rest of us we were so scared of him. We were so frightened. I was always so scared that, we'd get into trouble or we'd do something wrong. And because he just had this, he's really quite quiet, but then he'd just scream at you and he'd go, and you'd go through the roof. So, and then he had a way of talking that most of the players all would sort of try and take him on. And I always remember he goes, boys, I don't know. I don't make the rules. It's either you got the ball or you haven't got the ball. And when you haven't got the ball, you got to get the ball. It wasn't overly complicated. It was very simple. And that's what he said. The game is not complicated. And he'd always take him up. And we had a guy, Russell Green, who played with us and went to Hawthorn. The bizarre
we've had him on the podcast. Yep.
Oh, well, the bizarre thing was Greeny went to get away from Jeansy, and then Jeansy ended up being the coach the next year. So, and Greeny was the best at taking him off. He was fantastic at taking him off. So much so we just all break up, and it'd be a serious situation, and Greeny would be just in the background pulling faces and making noises and talking and stuff, and and he would bring you undone. But they were really good times.
Well, Bill, we appreciate you taking the time to sit down and have a chat with us. Thank you for your contribution to the footy club. 77 games. I know you're very modest about it, but that's 77 more games than any of us have played for our favourite footy club. So thank you for that. I know you've done some stuff with the club.
I just add, it was probably 177, 100 in the reserves and 77 in the season.
But you did spend some time with the past players committee and doing some stuff off field with the footy club as well. Obviously, an incredible career in basketball, both in Australia and international basketball. Thank you for everything you've done for all of those things. Well done on a great career, and thanks for joining us.
Okay, guys, that's great. Thanks it's been really entertaining. It's good fun.